Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a weekly installment where Michael K Vaughan and I talk about comic books to you in one way or another, in some shape or another, an artist or a comic book character or a run on a comic. And I horned my way into this whole thing years ago on Mike's channel. He was just minding his own business, and I horned my way in and said, "Hey, that sounds like fun." So he usually picks what we talk about. But today we have come to harmonious agreement on subject. We've picked a subject in order to doff the hat to Horror Mayhem, a BookTube event created by the Bookish Bryants and carried on uh, in honor of horror fiction of any kind. And there have been many, many horror-related comic books over the decades. And all of them have been terrible except for one. Michael K Vaughan is a huge fan of all of them. But of course, he comes by his love of monsters and giant apes, honestly. So he is a true blue fan of them. And yet, we are talking about a horror comic book today on which we agree. And that is Tomb of Dracula from Marvel Comics. In which the powers that be at Marvel Comics decided to make Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, the star of his own book. And it took off. It did really, really, really well. It was very popular, and it is also a masterpiece of a run on a comic. Now, Michael K Vaughan and I have talked about this before, but neither one of us needs much urging to talk about it again. This was, it was created by a whole bunch of people, but it was really the brainchild of the writer Marv Wolfman, and most especially his artistic team. There, I read comics for the artwork anyway, so of course I would say this. I am perfectly willing to acknowledge that the writing in these issues is incredible. Just incredibly good. But I read these things. I read these things when they were coming out on the newsstands. I read them for the artwork. And the artwork is by the artist Gene Colan and the inker Tom Palmer. And they're an amazing duo anyway, but they reach just a peak of perfection in this book. Just issue after issue after issue. I remember the guy that ran the shop where I got my comics back when these were coming out was surprised that I wanted them. That it wasn't anything called a pull list at the time. Now you can go to your comic shop and get a pull list. It was just he knew to set these things aside for me. I was helping him out in a whole bunch of different ways, so he was perfectly happy to do that. And he used to take a flyer on things that he thought would interest me. He had no real clue. So he would, when monster comics became really popular in the 70s, he would show me these things and say, "How about this? This looks really weird, huh?" And I'd say, "No, I actually remember weird tales. I remember older horror comics. They've always bored me. I don't want any of these things. Thanks anyway. I don't want any of these things." So he was a little bit surprised when I started telling him, "You've got to make sure to get a comic called Tomb of Dracula and to make sure I get an issue of every one." He was surprised by that because it's a horror comic, but it is so much better than all the rest of them put together. Oh my God. Mainly, I think, due to Gene Colan's artwork. Although Marv Wolfman had the weird task of making the main character in his book unrepentantly evil. This is the Dracula of Bram Stoker's novel. Not exactly. It's the Dracula of Bram Stoker's novel filtered through a million different movies with Christopher Lee or Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi or Jack Parr or whoever the dime store movie Dracula was. So the Dracula in these books, for instance, is always dressed like a count. He's always rather well dressed. He is the only main character in any Marvel comic at the time who wears shoes, well-tailored Italian leather blasted shoes. He wears a cloak. He wears a vest. He has a cummerbund. But he is never, every once in a while, he is given a sympathetic moment. He has children. He has a woman that he loves, a woman that he has loved in the past. But mostly he's a ranting supervillain, constantly referring to himself in the third person, constantly killing innocent people. He kills plenty of non-innocent people too, but the fun of this comic as it goes on, month after month after month, was juxtaposing a Dracula who's a larger-than-life, bombastic villain we nevertheless love against a constantly shifting cadre of normal humans, or one character, Blade, the vampire hunter, who's only half normal human, who are trying to kill him. The tension is the same as in Bram Stoker's novel. It's between Dracula and a group of people who are dedicated to killing him. And Thanks to a lot of elastic reading on Marv Wolfman's part, you don't know for sure that Dracula won't be killed at any point in these stories. Of course, you know that Dracula won't be killed because Dracula is one of the many immortal fictional characters bestowed on us by the Victorians. But nevertheless, this Dracula can die pretty declaratively. In the first issue, he's found dead, a skeleton with a stake through its heart. But it turns out that if you pull the stake out, he can recover. In one series of issues in this run, he is not only staked through the heart, he's completely disintegrated by sunlight to nothing at all, except a few stray particles of dust. But it turns out he is able to fully reconstitute himself from those particles of dust, given enough time and the right opportunity. So you don't know. The stakes are as high as they could get with this Dracula. In one issue, someone decides they're going to come up with something called wooden bullets, wooden stakes that can shoot at him, that very nearly kill him. We see him on the doorstep of death many, many times in the series. And although he is the villain, bombastic, shouty, megalomaniacal, killing innocent people, we still root for him. At least I do. When I was reading these issues, I was amazed by that. I confess, I wasn't always reading them. Oftentimes, I was just looking at them because they're so lovely to look at. This is all artwork by Gene Colan. Most of the time, he's inked by Tom Palmer. When Tomb of Dracula first started, it wasn't always custom to cite the colorist. And no offense to the colorists, there were many people involved in the colorization, in coloring Tomb of Dracula, including Glennis Ween and also Tom Palmer himself. No offense to any of them, but I honestly wish that Tomb of Dracula had not done color. This is the only Marvel title that I know of where it's actually better in black and white. As good as the coloring is, it's better in black and white. When Dracula became a big multi-voice magazine called Tomb of Dracula, it was done in black and white, and it was sumptuous, just beautiful. I think I'll show you some of those artwork pieces. I never, no offense to the colorists involved, but I never saw the color in Tomb of Dracula as adding much. I wish it had the courage of its convictions and just done it in black and white. This is the only Marvel title that Marvel used to have an Essentials reprint line, cheap, affordable paperback volumes that were cheap because they had no color. And they did 2 or 3 volumes for Dracula, for Tomb of Dracula, and they're better. They're the only ones. They're the only essential volumes I can say that about. They're actually more entertaining to look at than the colored ones. For me, the color distracts. But we have the Night Stalker, and then we have a dilapidated newsman. But here, I want to show you what I'm talking about with Gene Colan's artwork. Look at that. Look at that sequence. Look at how that weird bat thing is getting bigger in the background, just unobtrusively getting bigger. Or here we have this whole run in the comics has a Dracula foe called Harold. He is a weird character, one of the least likely characters in any kind of comic book. Still don't know quite what Wolfman was trying with him, and I feel certain that he is patterned after a real person. I just don't know the lore. But let me show you an example of what I'm talking about here. We have all sorts of backstory all throughout this issue, and notice how Gene Colan's people actually look like people. They don't look like comic stock templates. They look like human beings. But look, we have a group of people who more or less in this issue might be thinking of teaming up to take on Dracula. When suddenly Dracula appears, and he appears not in a cheesy comic book way of blasting through a wall or seeping through a window. No, he's super strong. He pushes the wall into splinters. Just like that. And look at what Colan is doing, not only with the positioning of the splinters, but with the splaying of the hand out of Dracula's face. It's just amazing. It's just amazingly done. It's so effective. And Gene Colan could do this sort of stuff. Yeah, see, look at this panel. Look at that. Look at how carefully he does that. He could do that sort of action stuff mixed with moody stuff. Yeah, look at this. It's a panel. He could do that really well anywhere. He was a thorough professional. But when he's doing something like the Avengers or Daredevil, much as I might like his panel arrangement, his visual skill, he is so much more effective when he's doing something like this, where he gets the run of the farm, basically, where he gets to do whatever he wants. You summoned me here to slay me, Quincy Harker, but tonight is the night you die. These things were very much helped by classic Gil Kane covers, very much so. I think it was probably Gil Kane. Actually, let me check and see. I think it was actually an eye-catching Gil Kane cover that at first attracted me to Tomb of Dracula. Was it? Yeah, it was. It was this. It was that cover. That's what drew me to Tomb of Dracula, and that was number 6. I had to get my guy at the comic shop to pull a few strings and get me all the earlier issues, because the earlier covers there are a couple of Gil Kane covers, but the first cover of Tomb of Dracula is rather dull. It's classic now, but it's rather boring, and it isn't what Dracula ends up looking once Gene Colan gets going in the book. That's just a standard Hammer Films Dracula. That's not the Dracula that Gene Colan gives us in the course of this title as it goes on for just month after month and year after year is fleshy. He's let me see if I can get a good image. There's so many good images here. Look at this one. Look at this Gil Kane cover. A vampire rides this train. With his Dracula, there is Blade. I know that's not going to remind you of Blade if you know the movies, but that's what the character looked like in the comics. But in reality, his Dracula gets fleshier, more Middle Eastern, Middle European, I should say. Very much a visual figure. Yeah, see, something like this. Very much along the lines of Jack Palance. But visually distinctive, which is great. It's what Gene Colan does best. And I want to show you an example of what I was talking about from Tomb of Dracula. Because Tomb of Dracula was this later thing, where you had all sorts of people doing the artwork chores, including even Howard Chaykin doing some of the covers. And unfortunately, disastrously, Steve Ditko draws one of the issues of these comics. But look at this sort of thing. You're only going to get that with Gene Colan. That kind of real-world panorama like that, you're only going to get it with him. Modern comic writers or artists can't even draw that sort of thing. They don't even know that they should be able to. They can barely, with computer help, draw computer stuff, draw computerized comic book figures. Well, let me see here. Let me give you... Oh, here we go. There's a character consulting a priest. Look at those faces. Just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I don't know if you noticed. Let me give you get you a better example here. This is how good the artwork is in these black and white issues. How textured it is. I imagine that Michael K Vaughan is going to be the only person who hears Steve Ditko doing black and white atmospheric artwork for Dracula and says, "Ooh, that sounds good." He's totally mismatched. It's just totally wrong. He's the only person who's not going to see that. Bless his heart. Let me see. Let me get another example here of Gene Colan doing what Gene Colan does best. I swear. Yeah, look at that. Just amazing. Just incredible. And that's what you get in these issues. You get Dracula all through Dracula, and then the magazine that was then done. Look at this. Look at this sequence. Can I get this sideways like that so you can really concentrate on it? Look at that. A human form jumps off a tower and slowly metamorphoses into a bat form. Just amazing. Just incredible. And so this was an absolute joy. At the same time that I was getting superhero comics. Marvel's Spider-Man was great here. It was Ross Andru. The Fantastic Four was pretty good in this time period. Conan the Barbarian, of course, was tromping all over this time period and doing a great job. That was another one where the guy who was at my comic shop was a little confused. This guy's not a superhero. And I will be the lone voice in saying that DC Comics was also great at this time. But Tomb of Dracula was a must-buy. It was a thing that I waited for when it was coming out because every issue was so good. So it was a joy to revisit this for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. As we say goodbye, to June on the Range, or rather to Horror Mayhem, which brings us to June on the Range. God only knows the mischief that Michael K. Vaughan could do with June on the Range. It's possible in the month of June that we will be revisiting some Marvel Westerns, Rawhide Kid, Two Gun Kid, Kid Colt, Outlaw, maybe even the original Ghost Rider. We shall see. We shall see. But for now, it was a joy to end May on this note, because the Tomb of Dracula reprints, in this case, if you don't know them and you haven't read them and you're now curious because you've watched Mike's video and mine, you could go probably on eBay and get those old essential volumes. Maybe they're collectible, but maybe they're affordable. And in this case, you're not missing anything. In this case, black and white reprints of these color issues won't hurt them at all. So Gene Colan, I believe, is very much a black and white artist. Some artists are doing their artwork looking forward to someone coloring their work. I don't believe he is at all, which makes him a detriment on something like the Avengers, but not with Tomb of Dracula. So definitely go out and find an Essentials volume if you can, if they're affordable. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.